The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is André and I'm your host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers. And big thanks to you, gentle listener, for tuning in once again to another show. Tonight's episode, and by tonight I mean today, possibly. I don't know what time you're listening to this. Are you at the gym? Are you at home? Are you in the car? Are you gardening? How are things? How's life? How's the family? The friends? Is your mom? She good? You still talk to her? Today's episode I speak to Janet Hetherington, who is a Canadian writer and artist. She's the partner of Ron Sutton, a former guest on the show. She's a Prix Aurora Award winner for science fiction excellence in 1999. She worked on a 60 Years of Superman exhibit, which we didn't talk about. Crap, I feel bad that I didn't bring that up because I wanted to. Anyway, maybe I'll have Janet on again on the line. It'd be great. I had a great talk with her. She knows a lot about a lot, and has been involved in a lot of projects and a lot of really cool projects. So it was great talking with her about her career and about her life and everything up until this point. Great conversation, and it's going to be here for you in just a minute. So in life, things have been going pretty well, I must say, this past couple of weeks. Not too bad. I've been busy. Wrestling's opening up again, so I've been doing a lot more of that. For those of you who know that part of my life, which I've talked about here. Some cons have been coming back around, so I'm getting amped up for that. I haven't put my name in for HowlCon this year just because last few years haven't been, that was around before the pandemic, weren't great for me at that event. I don't know if it's just there's a lot going on, or my work's not as focused as others' stuff there. I don't know, but anyway, it's I'm not planning on doing that this year, mate. I don't think. The play I'm in is picking up, so that's fun. I've been getting rehearsals in again for that, and just getting to spend some time with friends and family. Got a friend's birthday party coming up this Saturday when this episode drops, so that's going to be fun too. Catching up on Moon Knight. I am caught up. The final episode drops in a couple days. I really like it, man. I really, really like it. It's a real highlight reel of Oscar Isaac's acting ability. I don't know how familiar the show is. I'm not going to go too spoilery with it. However, he does play multiple personalities within one character. And people that sort of shadow over his English accent in the series, I feel as though it's explained. When you watch the show, it's explained. It's explained quite well. So whether you think he has a good English accent or not, he isn't really supposed to. Based on where it comes from in his own psyche and how he used it to deal with the trauma and pain he had growing up. I'd say Moon Knight, as far as characters with tragic backstories go in the Marvel Universe, which has its own fair share of tragic backstories, his seems the most, I don't want to say it's the most tragic, because I don't know, how do you measure pain or the pain that affects people, especially fictional characters? However, the most recent episode that deals through his trauma as a child and leading to what he has, there's some real world stuff in there. Sad, tragic, real world stuff that is done beautifully in the series. It's heartbreaking in some places, and they do a really good job of showing how that might fracture a young person's mind and lead towards the sort of dissociative identity disorder that Mark Spector has to contend with. So I don't know where the show's going. I don't know if there's going to be another season. I think it's still up in the air about whether that's happening or not. It seemed like Marvel was marketing it as a mini-series, not a series. But also, I believe they've changed the verbiage on the last episode in the recent trailer from being series finale to season finale. So that may indicate what they're going to do later. We'll see, but who knows? They also just recently announced they're putting back the Spider-Verse, the new Spider-Verse movie, which I'm disappointed because I God, I love that first one. I'm super excited for the second one. And before I get to my interview with Janet, I have a funny story. So I have a little brother through big brothers, big sisters. His name's Ethan. And I often take him to movies because I love movies, and he does too. And he's 17 now, and when I met him when he was 13, he was allowed to pretty much see whatever he wanted. So, I took him to various horror movies and other things. So he's really into horror. But this past weekend, I took him to see The Northman, the new movie by Robert Eggers. I'm a huge fan of his work. I love The Witch. I loved The Lighthouse. And so I was super excited for this one. So we went, we watched it. It's this beautiful, sprawling Viking epic revenge story that was very obviously, it's an Old Norse thing. That was obviously the inspiration beside Hamlet, or for Hamlet rather, from Shakespeare. And I believe that's common knowledge that he took that story from this old Norse legend or story. And it was beautiful movie, full of wonderful imagery and gorgeous cinematography and just dark, broody, great stuff. Love the movie. It's when it comes to movies, you get into arguments about what's a film and what's a movie, and what's the difference between the two and how you differentiate those sort of things. But as far as high concept, high art things go, I'd say it's up there. It's gorgeous, and there's a lot of stuff under the surface, and a lot of beautiful acting and beautiful set pieces and beautiful everything. Gorgeous movie. So after the movie's over, the lights come up, and there's a woman in the back sitting with her husband who says something like, I thought that would be, I think her friends were there too. They said, I thought that would be more like Game of Thrones. And then the other person says, that was awful. And she goes, I know. And then they're on their way out, and she says to her husband, we should have went to that Sandra Bullock movie, the Lost City, the one that's also playing. I'm sure it's fine, but it's a very different type of movie than this one. And then she walks by a poster for the Minions, the new Minions movie, Rise of Gru, coming out. She goes, oh, a new Minions movie. Super excited. It's just, I don't want to be perceived as a movie snob. Maybe I am one. I don't want to be perceived as one because I don't feel like I am. But sometimes when I hear people say things like that, it just, it floors me. It's that gorgeous, beautifully filmed movie with this dark, awesome story about revenge and about love and about a place in the universe and fate. That was garbage. But this Minions movie, I'm looking forward to this. This is where it's at. So I had a teachable moment when Ethan and I were walking to the car. He said something like, he's kind of joking about what that woman had said about the Minions movie, and said, I feel like if that's what you're going to say, you shouldn't have your opinion shouldn't matter. And I was like, well, I feel as though supposed to be a guiding influence on your life with this program. I have to caution you that that's not the healthiest attitude to have when it comes to somebody who has a differing opinion than you. But, as the film fan in me, you might be onto something. So I did use it as a teachable moment, but also was a little proud of my my little there for echoing a sentiment that I definitely had in my head. But enough about me, enough about my little life, my little corner of reality. Let's learn about Janet Hetherington, whose name I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. I didn't ask her to tell me if that was correct, although looking at it, I hope so. Great conversation, lovely lady, a lot of great insight into writing, and a great talk about representation, about how important that is to little girls or little people of color or little people of various sexual orientations. Little people all over need to see themselves represented in fiction, and I'm very happy and heartwarmed to hear stories like Janet's that talk about somebody who looked for themselves in the fiction they loved, didn't see it, and then went on to manifest it, to create it, to make it a reality. And Janet sure did that, and she was a great conversation on the show. So without much further ado, let's talk to Janet Hetherington.
Well, that's my origin story. That's a pretty interesting question because I was born in Toronto, mm-hmm. but I grew up in a very small town. It's called Wallaceburg, Ontario. And It was a agricultural town. Not a lot of interest in the arts. It was kind of interesting for me because I was always a huge, huge comics fan. I started out reading when I was I don't know 8 or 9 years old.
Where did you have access to comics at in a place like that?
Yeah, well, it was one of those situations where it was basically at the local grocery store, not grocery store, what do you call it? Convenience store, and every Wednesday you'd go down there because they'd have the new comics come out. And I was there like immediately, and I was buying and reading everything. So, I think I cut my teeth on Archie's and sort of that, sort of junior romance stuff. But I was soon reading a lot of the DC superhero stuff. Absolutely loved Superman, adored Lois Lane, Supergirl. I read Green Lantern. I'm a huge Green Lantern fan, and all the romance comics.
Really?
So,
like the old. What year are we talking about here?
Well, okay. So I started reading. I'd say I started reading comics in the 60s.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was
So
trying to place what kind of romance comics you would have been reading. So
yeah.
Stan
So
Lee's
it was
romance comics.
Late 60s, early 70s romance comics.
Okay, so I think because Stan Lee did a bunch of those modern romance or whatever.
Yeah.
Back in the day. So.
But really, it was all the DC romance stuff that I was reading. I was mostly into DC comics. I didn't read a lot of Marvel. So I did have access to some of that through a friend of mine. But really, I was, they talk about Marvel zombies, but I was a DC zombie. So I was a huge fan. I was one of those people too. I wrote letters. I wrote letters to DC Comics commenting on the stories. And they, in the romance comics, they actually used to have contests. They had poetry contests, and they invited readers to submit their poems. And I actually had a poem published in one of the issues there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. My first sale, $2 US, and I got a byline.
That's amazing. You're more successful than most people that try to get into comics already at that age.
Well, it was interesting because I've said this to Ron before. Representation matters because I didn't see a lot of women's names associated with comics. Mm-hmm. So even though I was a huge fan, and obviously I like to write, I wrote. For the school newspaper. I was writing poetry and short stories as a kid, read a lot of science fiction, huge Isaac Asimov and Ray Bradbury fan. I didn't see women's names reflected in comics. It was only later that I got to meet Ramona Fradon and Trina Robbins but I didn't see, all I saw were men. The men's names. Men were the editors. Men were the writers. Men were the artists. So,
as a child, seeing that, did you register that young, reading these things that there are no women around, or were you looking for that, or is it only something you came to realization when you got a little older?
Well, all it really did was I didn't see those women's names, so it was not a career path that I really considered for myself.
I see. So at that point you hadn't thought you could get in because you weren't a man.
Yeah, and it was interesting though, because one of my favorite characters is and was Lois Lane. Mm-hmm. And Lois, she was a reporter, very successful reporter for a big metropolitan newspaper, and her boyfriend was a superhero. Mm-hmm. She was fabulous. And that's what I ended up doing. I ended up going to journalism school. I often say I followed in the footsteps of Lois Lane because she actually had a great career. It was only later, actually, I went to Carleton University, which is in Ottawa, where I live now. I actually graduated from Carleton and ended up staying in Ottawa. During my time at Carleton, I did get involved with a lot of other science fiction and comic book fans. There was a big fandom there, and we ended up putting on the MapleCon comic book conventions. So I was very involved with that organization. And also, I got to use my writing and illustrating skills because I like to draw. I've loved to draw ever since I was a kid. I used to draw my own comic strips. I did a sort of an Archie style romance strip called Sweet Caroline for the high school newspaper in Wallaceburg. But I never, again, as I said, I never thought of it as a possible actual career path for myself, even though I was doing these things.
Really? So what was that? Was that book just sort of like an Archie style book, or was there a through line, or your story rather?
Yeah, it was. Like, it was more of. It was Archie influence, but it was more of a romance style, which is something that's carried on through my own artistic career. The romance, sort of that real Liechtenstein, tears coming down, the flowing hair.
Yeah, you need the woman in the forefront of the screen with the guy in the background somewhere, or the other woman.
Yeah, that's it.
Woman, and that's very important for that. So just going back a bit, when you were growing up. And discovering comics, brothers or sisters, or
yes, I have a sister, Deborah, and a brother, Bill.
Were they into this sort of stuff as well?
Yeah, I shared my interest. My sister and I used to collaborate on comic strips together. She actually went on to study art at the University of Windsor, but she was more of a fine artist. I was totally into the comic stuff. And my brother, he sort of had an interest, not so much. I think the claim to fame there was I taught him his first words, which were "I'm Batman," which I don't think my parents really apprecied it that much. But
that doesn't look quite as good in the baby book, I guess, as mom.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I was really, really into comics, and it was a escape. It was a really. We didn't have social media when I was growing up.
Yeah, for sure. And even I grew up in a small town just before social media as well. So I can. Yeah. It wasn't even a town; it's like a village. Town was 50 minutes away. So I totally appreciate that sort of escapism that comics brought, because my story is very similar, as well as science fiction and that sort of stuff. But it sounds to me like you were more aside from comics, you're also kind of looking at some real literature as well, not just obviously mentioning Asimov and those guys, but
right.
Was it fully literature? Were you into journalism too, through Lois Lane? Were you discovering that growing up, or was it something?
Yeah, yes. Well, exactly. I ended up studying journalism at Carleton University. I have a degree in journalism, and this is another interesting thing that happened was while I was at Carleton. Everybody, when you're a student, you're very poor. Mm-hmm. So you do whatever you can to make ends meet, and I had a job at one point as a waitress. Absolutely. I think everybody has those stories, who went to university and was putting themselves through school. But the other thing was that I started freelancing at a very early age, and the places where I was getting published with my journalism were places like Amazing Heroes and Wizard Magazine and Hero Magazine and Comic Collector Magazine. I contacted them, I pitched them, and I got work.
Amazing.
And this
I'm always
was
so floored by people that have these stories from back in the day, because now it's all internet. You find someone through a message board, or you contact them through just whatever their thing is online. But the ideas of having to call or mail in stuff, wait for return, go to conventions, talk to these people in person, it's just so daunting compared to how streamlined it seems now. It seems like it must have been so much more of a struggle back then.
Well, an interesting part of that story is that for Amazing Heroes magazine, which I wrote for quite a long time, they gave me the Canadian beat. Mm-hmm. So I was responsible, because of course all us Canadians know each other, right?
Of course, yeah, absolutely.
So
I know Janet from Ottawa.
That's right, exactly. And so you do. But one of the people that they gave me to interview used to do this volume, and I don't know if you're familiar with it. It was called Amazing Heroes previews issue. And it was this big tome collection of the upcoming comics for the year. And it was really, I mean, again, pre-internet. So nobody had access to this information. It was all very, very exciting if you're a comics fan. So anyway, one of the people that they gave me to interview was this artist who lived in Toronto, and his name was Ron Sutton. So actually, that's how Ron and I met. I started interviewing him for Amazing Heroes, and eventually he came to Ottawa for one of the MapleCon conventions that I was working on, and we ended up getting together. And it's so that's comics amazing. Brought us together.
I know that's I love those sort of stories too, because especially when you meet creators that that are with other creators. Because I've had a few in the show before, Troy Little and Brenda Hickey, who both do various cartooning and comic work, and it's always nice. It's a nice, lovely sort of meet cute, as you were, especially when it comes to comics, because it's nice when nerds find each other. I always say so.
Right.
That's so cool. So at this point, sir, when you're doing the op-eds for Wizard and stuff, how old are you at this point?
How old was I?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I would have been in my 20s at that point, late 20s. And Ron moved to Ottawa in 1992, I want to say. So, gosh, I graduated. I was in my late 20s, early 30s. Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And
so, were you pursuing like straight up like journalistic endeavors as well as this sort of stuff? Like, were you writing for papers or doing?
Yes. Yes, I was writing for mainstream magazines as well. I was my first job when I graduated was for a magazine. It's no longer published, unfortunately, but it was called Canadian Consumer Magazine. And it was basically the Canadian equivalent of Consumer Reports. And I was hired as the copy editor right straight out of journalism school. And then I was promoted to associate editor. So I had 6 writers under me, and we published a bilingual, actually English and French edition every month. And it was a really good training ground for, that kind of writing and journalism.
Was that a daunting task, like being put in such a high position right off the get-go?
Not really. I mean, it's funny because even now in my current work, because I work currently, right now I work with the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and I'm a senior communications advisor. Yep. It's all about project management. My beloved work back schedules. It's like, well, what date does this thing have to hit the stands? And then you work back from that date to make sure that you hit all your marks along the way so that it's published. And I'm sure you find the same that kind of thing when you're producing your shows. It's like, I want to get this show out by a certain date, so I have to do this, and this to meet that deadline.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So it really was. It's I call it a project management approach. And so after
I salute you for that, because I was always that kid that dreaded the group project in school, because I always felt like I'd have all my stuff done right away, and then be waiting on people forever to get the rest of it, or they never come through. And I'd always be that one guy who's trying to put everything together at the end, or doing the stuff for other people because I know they're not going to do it. So,
a lot of it is, especially when you're a managing editor or working as an associate editor or managing editor role. A lot of it is people wrangling. It is trying to make sure that they're going to be able to deliver the best product that they can. And then I just found, like, I've been on both sides of, always say I've been on both sides of the editorial desk. I've been the freelancer who has to deliver, and I've been the managing editor who has to work with the freelancer to deliver. So I respect writers very much, because it is a lot of work, and I really appreciate good writing, and I think that I feel I have really good editing skills. I try to listen to the writer's voice, so that when I'm editing, I'm trying to get the most out of that story, but at the same time preserve the voice of the writer that they've put into it.
Do you find that a difficult line to tread? Because I can, like, I've never had much editing experience in that way. Like, I've done some comic work, but it's mostly just indie stuff I've done myself. So working with people like that, do you find in order to, because I know people have their own sort of flavor with how they write.
Yes.
But like, I don't know, for example, like Hunter S. Thompson, you think the way he writes, and then you throw in an editor that wants it, the tool it a certain way to make it fit a certain format, would kind of rob that of some of that. So like, would that be something, like, do you find that that's a hard line to tread, or is it something that comes naturally to you?
I don't think it's that hard a line to tread, because there's certain conventions in journalism, and you may have heard of the pyramid system.
Yes, yeah. You want to explain it for those who don't know?
Yeah, sure. So all the news is fit to print. Basically you want your the really important stuff at the top of your story, and then you're going to drill down to the bottom. This is especially for newspapers or that kind of writing. Magazine style, it's a little bit different. Web writing is different again, because to me that's digestible chunks. That's the way I look at web writing.
It's all about grabbing your attention with headlines. You know,
absolutely.
Now it's literally like clickbait's the word that everybody uses.
I was going to say clickbait. That's it.
You'll never guess who was wearing this at this thing, or you'll never guess what old star looks like now. And you always have to click and go see who it is if you're interested enough to know.
Well, really what it is like, what does this story mean to me as a reader? Because I always put myself in the audience's head. Okay. So what does this mean to the reader? Like, why should I read this? Okay. What does this mean to me? And it was interesting. I did an interview. I'm trying to remember. I think it was Combo Magazine, or maybe it was Comic Book Collector. It's sort of blurring at this point. I did an interview with Frank Miller, and he was wonderful. I mean,
when was this?
Oh God, we're going back again to the 80s. I think I'd have to go and look. I'd have to search the internet to get the exact information. I'm sorry.
As a fan of Frank Miller, my relationship with him is kind of like a before and after sort of. I'd say before All-Star Batman, and then after is kind of where my love of him sort of stopped there. I'm not against him or anything. My love of his work has sort of dripped off, but I mean, as far as being an amazing creator and like, as far as being a giant in the comic industry, you can't rob him of that. Politics and me disagree later on in his life. So.
Well, that's it. But it was one of these pieces where, I can't even, like, it's terrible. I can't even recall exactly what the story ended up being, what was about. It was one of his newer projects. And, you don't want it to come off sounding like a puff piece or a promotional piece or something like that, because absolutely it's Frank Miller. You're getting the insights. I was able to get some insights from him. And I remember the title I wrote was Frank Miller Gets Personal, because he did. He was talking from the heart about his work.
Oh, wow.
And to me, that is a grabber. That's a grabber for an audience who say, oh yeah, Frank Miller. I love Frank Miller. And I'd love to hear what he has to say or read what he has to say.
You're right. He always seemed kind of private back in, I wouldn't say like super private, but like he was not super forthcoming with, there wasn't a ton of interviews with him and stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's it. That's it. Exactly. Yeah. There wasn't. And so I was very fortunate, and I've been very fortunate to be able to interview a lot of people, lot of really important, in my mind, creators, during that phase of my career. Wow. And I say phase of my career because by 1994, Ron and I were doing the Janny Weezy comic strip. Yeah, I was starting to morph into the comics creation phase of my career. Mm-hmm. So in 1997, I brought out Eternal Romance, which was a supernatural comic book series that I self-published. And so it's a 25th anniversary actually this year of Eternal Romance, which I think is pretty amazing.
Great title. What was the concept?
It was supernatural romance. It was modeled after, I guess you could say it was a cross between, some of the young romance comics and House of Mystery. Okay. Cool. So it was
a great combo.
Yeah, it was so much fun, but it was a little ahead of its time. It came out about the cusp of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It was obvious. ahead of the curve in terms of creating women comics for women, and which was interesting because it sort of happened more after I only did 4 issues of Eternal Romance. But that did actually open up some doors for me, in particular with being able to script Elvira, Mistress of the Dark comics. Right. Ron had actually been drawing it for 3 years, and I had a chance to meet editor Richard Howell. Ron was delivering some artwork. This is when you did things in person, because at that time we didn't scan our artwork and send it digitally. We had to send it by FedEx. In this case, we were actually doing a convention in New Jersey. And so we made an appointment to go and see Richard Howell, and we had lunch, and I started pitching him some ideas, and he liked it, and he knew Eternal Romance, which completely floored me. Wow. And he was open to seeing some samples of my writing. Wow. So I wrote Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. Again, the internet was pretty new, but he loved it, and Ron ended up drawing it. So my first published story for Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, the Claypool series, was something that was drawn by Ron, and it was first of many collaborations to follow. So I was really fortunate in that regard.
Did you have a decent knowledge of Elvira prior to this project? I mean, obviously, if you're going to do the project, I assume you do a lot of research and get to know what you want. But were you aware of the comics and the show and all that, or not the comics, or the series, the shows, the movies and all that sort of stuff?
I was absolutely. I was a huge fan of Elvira, her movie, the House of Mystery comics. I mean, yeah. She actually was the hostess for that. DC. She also did the Marvel adaptation. They did a Marvel adaptation of the movie. So I was very familiar with Elvira. I'd seen Ron's work because he'd been working on it. So the pages had been coming through our house. So I saw it. Of course, yeah. But what was really interesting with the Claypool series, as opposed to some of the earlier treatments of Elvira in comics, is she was always, as I said, treated as a hostess, much like she was a horror hostess for a movie macabre. Mm-hmm. So it was sort of like, Tales from the Crypt or whatever, she'd come on and say, "Hey kiddies, here's a super spooky story for you." And then they'd go into something that has nothing to do with Elvira, right? It's just a horror story or a morality tale most often. Mm-hmm. With Claypool, they made a real point of making her the protagonist. She was the hero of that series, which was really fun to write as a woman, a female creator, to write for another really outspoken, funny woman. It was a blast, and she had some really strong ideas about how she wanted to be presented in those stories.
Peterson did? Cassandra Peterson?
She's a pet lover. She loves animals. She didn't want anything that had to do with hurting animals. She wanted to be represented as a vegetarian. In the series, it was really funny because she ate a lot of junk food in the series. She was always eating pizza and stuff, mm-hmm. but they were always vegetarian pizzas. Mm-hmm. Perfect. And so she had no problem with that. She one of the notes that we did get was that they really wanted to show her in her trademark black outfit. Sometimes I would write stories, like there was one that she was sort of like an Oktoberfest, and she was in the beer garden outfit type of thing. They would go for it sometimes, but really she preferred to have the trademark black dress. So I'd always try to make sure that got written into the story. As far as working on that book, it was really, really good for me as a writer to develop my craft. And I say that because Richard Howell was very demanding in the scripts, even though the scripts, I started out doing backups. So they were maybe 6 to 8 pages. That was it. And then they always had a lead story, which I didn't get to write until later. Mm-hmm. They had another writer on the book called Frank Strom, and he was doing most of the leads. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the backup stories Richard, as the editor, he was very invested in the stories, and he wanted a joke a panel. So whether the jokes were told in the balloons, like went through a joke that's being told by Elvira to whoever she's talking to, or a physical humor joke. So
in every panel,
and the panel had to advance the plot.
Wow, that sounds like
So that is going to hone your storytelling skills real fast when that's what they want. And it was really a wonderful experience, I've got to say. And I mean, Ron and I are both still in touch with Richard on a regular basis. Such a wonderful relationship, a really, really lovely editor. And, I had so much fun writing on that book.
Yeah, no, that's amazing, especially that you got to cut your teeth sort of more so into a more mainstream comic with such I wouldn't call her feminist. I guess I could call her feminist icon. I think I should. As her, because she's a hero of mine as well, Miss Peterson, because just for I'm a horror fan myself, so I mean she's always been a real champion for that, and that sort of entertainment, but also just as a person, like the animal rights stuff, and recently when she sort of came out and she was outspoken about with some of her detractors and stuff, like this sort of toxic masculinity fandom thing of people like that were speaking out against her when she came out. She was always very vocal and eloquent in her responses, and took a lot of heat over the years from fanboys and other people that felt like they owned her. So I just always really liked her and her message, and it's really cool that you get to work on that in that way. And
yes, I always found it very positive, and a joy to work on that.
Yeah, I would say it's amazing. It's really cool, and to do it with such a character like that is amazing. Awesome. So what was next?
Yeah, so it's so funny. I've had so many wonderful opportunities throughout my different phases of my career. Another book that I got to work on was The Secret Loves of Geek Girls, and that one was really fun. It was basically a prose story, but I did illustrations which were inset, and it got quite a lot of coverage. I think I even did a clip for Entertainment Weekly on that. And then Ron and I had collaborated for a Gothic horror anthology, the Gothic Tales of Haunted Love, which again got amazing reviews. Like it was very dark. It was so different from my Elvira stuff, which was very light and fun. This was so dark on the horror spectrum.
And was it a big departure? So The Secret Lives of Geek Girls, is that what you said the previous project was?
Secret Loves of Geek Girls. Yeah, that was really different. It was an anthology, so I got to participate with a bunch of other women writers, creators, I should say, including Margaret Atwood, who contributed a comic strip to that book. And it was so successful. It was a Kickstarter. It started as a Kickstarter, and it was so successful that Dark Horse bought the rights and republished it. So that just totally amazing. But it's not real. One thing I do have to caution when I'm doing convention appearances and I get younger teens coming to look at it, I sort of caution if the parent is there, I say, look, this is some of the themes in there are a little bit more adult than not my work, but some of the other themes. So if the reader is an older teen, there's no problem. But I sort of really caution on the side of making sure that that the younger ones, if they are going to read it, that the parent is aware and that they can have those important conversations about the subject matter, because it talks about growing up and feeling and developing hormones and all that stuff. It's secret loves and geek girls. So
wow, that's really cool. That sounds like a really neat little project. And like growing up, obviously, there's probably a lot in a small town being into nerdy stuff that you would be able to draw from that. So
oh yeah, for sure.
Did you find it tough in that way to find a community as a kid in that sort of environment?
Yeah, well, I was really lucky when I grew up in Wallaceburg that I had a good friend named Leanne Brown, who was another girl.
Oh.
And she was in the comics,
Awesome.
which is amazing. I mean, when you think about it, going to that time period. And she was a Marvel fan. So this is how I got exposed to the Marvel comics. And she was totally into Daredevil. Oh my gosh, she loved Daredevil. And so we used to swap comics, I mean, that's what you did. So so I got to share my DC mania, and she got to share her Marvel zombieism, if that's a word.
It is now.
It is now. Speaking of zombieism, that sort of takes me into my next phase of my career. So in what year? 2008. Yeah, 2008. I sort of noticed that a lot of the comics that were being written were written by people who had really successful TV shows and movies. And I thought, well, it's really hard for me to get a job writing comics when don't have a successful TV show or movie. So I decided I was going to write a TV show and a movie. So I sort of started shifting over to writing movies and that sort of thing in 2008. And I did my first spec script was about a pandemic, a zombie pandemic, which it's funny now because I'm looking at it now, and we've learned so much through the actual pandemic, and I'm rereading the old script. I'm thinking nobody would buy this now because we know so much more about how infections spread and everything. But it was a wonderful exercise for the first one. And it led to some other important opportunities. So this is what happens, if you want to do something with your life, you have to do it and take that risk. And I wrote a short script in it. It was called The House on Arch Lane, and it was a thriller. And through IMDb, I was able to find a producer in Germany who was looking for a short script. They had just bought a Red camera, and they wanted something that had, it was a thriller or a horror thriller that they could really optimize or use demonstrate how well they could use this camera so they could get their own gigs. Right. And anyway, they read the script. They said they loved it, which is amazing right out of the gate. It's only later I learned how unusual this was.
You must have just thought this is how it works.
This is how it works. Exactly.
They just give you a job.
But they produced it. They rewrote the script. Actually, they reworked it. And it was funny because I remember when one of the producers sent me the copy of the script that they were shooting, and I'm reading it. I'm thinking, they've really changed a lot from my original script. And
how did that make you feel? It wasn't until creator, I guess. Like
I'm sorry.
Oh, I imagine that'd probably make you feel kind of betrayed, would it? At that
well,
point? Not having experience, I guess, to know.
It did at first, and then I saw the film. And once I saw the film, I understood why they made those choices. And it really helped me as a screenwriter understand what is necessary to tell a good story, because I was still a novice and I didn't understand. So, so I mean, that was a real wonderful learning experience. In fact, I think that every time I write something and enter a different phase, it's a learning experience. But out of that, the House on Arch Lane, it just seems like things, I don't know, they bounce. And I for some reason I was in Montreal. I think it was for Fantasia, or it was one of these film festivals, but it was science fiction and horror, and they were showing The House on Arch Lane. And I ran into this colleague of mine, Brett Kelly, and his wife Anne Marie, and I remember Brett was saying, "I didn't know you wrote screenplays," because he knew me from the comics world. And I said, "Yeah, well, I just started, right?" And the next thing you know, well, I'm collaborating with Brett, and he and I have worked on so many movies together now. and the latest one being Galaxy Warriors, which is a retro science fiction 80s piece of wonderful memorabilia. I don't know. It was just so much fun to write. And it unfortunately, I mean, he was planning to wrap it to film in the 2020, and that all went to heck.
Of course, yeah.
So it took 2 years. It took the whole pandemic to get this thing done. But now he's going into festivals with it, and it's going to be premiering here in Ottawa in November.
So when approaching,
excuse me, in I didn't say no. Did I say November? I meant September. Yeah.
So when approaching these sort of projects, as I was looking through, some of the films you had written.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. When approaching these projects, I was just looking at some of the films you had written.
Yes.
Like, is it the producer comes to you and say, "This is the story, the movie I want to tell," or is this stuff that you just have in your pocket that you're working on throughout that you pitch to them and get made?
Yeah. So that's a good question. With Brett's movies, usually he has some sort of agreement, usually or an idea of an agreement with a distributor often, or he has an idea of what he wants to make, a passion project. So he will come to me with maybe a paragraph or two and say, "This is the story that we want to make," and then I will flesh it out. So often it really is. I love it because I think that I am happiest when I'm doing assignments, because to me they're challenges. It's sort of like there was a once when there was a company called Imagine Impact that was looking for sports stories, and like I'm not a huge sports fan, but I looked at it was a possibility that if they like your story, they'd make it into a film. And so I wrote a whole pitch. I'm not a huge sports fan, but boy, did I have fun doing it. I had to research, the whole thing, and I learned a lot. I mean, I love watching sports movies, so I watched a lot of sports movies. But going back to Brett's movies, it's the same thing. When we did Murder in High Heels, he wanted to do a film noir, and he wanted to do it real film noir, black and white, 40s, the jargon, the dress, everything. So that was great. When I was writing that script, I had the thesaurus, 1940s slang open on my browser 24/7, because I wanted to capture the flavor of that era. And I'm a huge film noir fan. Like, I mean, I
was going to say, like, you need to have a real passion for that genre specifically.
Well, I'm a genre junkie.
Awesome.
So, I mean, you tell me what kind of movie you want made. I mean, I wrote 2 Westerns for Brett. I mean, I love Westerns. So when he said he needed a Western, I mean, it's like, oh, okay. I mean, I said, well, do you want this kind of Western? Or do you want that? Do you want like A Fistful of Dollars, or do you want an old school John Wayne? I mean, I know those genres, right? So, yeah.
Do you have a favorite film noir film?
My favorite film noir. Gosh. I don't know. We've been watching a lot lately.
Yeah.
There was one I saw that I thought was amazing, and it was called Gun Crazy.
Really?
And that was a really good one. But there's it's funny because a lot of the Hitchcocks are film noirs, and to me. And
yeah, well, I would say you're probably right. Most of them do feel. I mean, Vertigo and some of those do really feel that way.
Yeah.
I just watched the one, it's the Criterion one called Detour. Which,
which
I really enjoyed. It's a short one, but it was really good. And I like Sam Fuller a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with his movies.
I'm sorry?
Sam Fuller, are you familiar with his movies? He did like Shot Corridor and a bunch of those other ones back then.
Oh, nice.
They're amazing. And he's done some amazing ones as well. But that's really cool, because I was going to ask you about that, because it does seem like you switch genres a lot as a writer. I guess you have to, especially as a film writer. But
well, actually, it's funny because they would prefer you to stay in your corner. They'd like to say, okay, well, Janet's a science fiction writer, or Janet's a horror writer. But I don't know. I like to play around. It's funny because one of the things I just worked on again for Brett and Anne-Marie Kelly is a really excellent puppet maker and puppeteer.
Oh, wonderful.
And she makes puppets, well, I mean, come on, let's look at the Muppets. And so they decided they were going to do a movie with puppets, and so I wrote them a 10-minute script with about with puppets in it, and it was really fun. I mean, again, it's all about the fun, right? Like how you approach it, and in the back and forth. Like I pitched them one idea, and they said, "No, it didn't really work." And then I said, "Well, what are you really looking for?" And then they tell me more, and it's like, okay, now I have a better idea, and then I can pitch it back. And it for comics and for movies, it's all about the collaboration. I mean, as I said, Ron and I work so closely with Richard Howell on the Elvira series. That was a lot of collaboration. And then again, with Brett, it's collaboration, and with whomever I get to work with. But to go back to your original question about, do you come up with the ideas, or do you work with what you're given? Definitely when you're, work for hire or whatever, you work with what you're given. At the same time, I'm always writing specs. So I have other spec scripts that I go back to, and they're in development. I have one that, having grown up in Wallaceburg near the Baldoon settlement, I wrote a horror thriller called The Black Goose of Baldoon, and it's all sort of steeped in the Baldoon mystery, which is from that settlement that's right near Wallaceburg.
You have to elaborate on that for me, because I'm not sure I'm familiar. I'm a horror guy. I'm not sure I'm familiar with that.
So this is a very standard horror, or I should say legend. Okay, mystery legend. The Baldoon mystery is basically set in the 1800s. There is a farmer. His name is MacDonald. Old MacDonald had a farm, and it actually worked that into the script.
Nice.
And anyway, what happened was that he, at the farmhouse and in the barn, strange things started to happen. Fires would start spontaneously. Pebbles would fly up and hit the windows. Things would fall down from the ceiling in the barn, like all these farm utensils. And so anyway, he goes to this wise woman to find out what's going on, because they think the place is haunted. So MacDonald goes to this wise woman who says, "Have you seen a strange goose on your property?" And he says, "Well, yes, there's been this goose, and it's basically a goose with a black head. It's the black goose." And he said, "Well, this goose is not a goose. It is a witch, and you are being I guess you are being haunted. You are being haunted. So the only way to stop the goose is a supernatural goose, this witch who basically coveted the property, who wanted to take the property away from this farmer, was trying to drive them off the property. So the only way to stop the goose is to take a silver bullet." Where have we heard this before? And basically shoot the goose and stop the manifestation. So anyway, so MacDonald, is down by the river one day. He's got his shotgun with him. He just happens to have his silver bullet handy, and the goose appears. So he shoots the goose. He wings it. He doesn't kill it dead. But the hauntings stop. And the next time he's in town, he goes by a storefront, and the woman who's in there, the woman who had wanted his property, has her arm in a sling. So this is the Baldoon mystery. This is the story that's been handed down from generation to generation. What I did with The Black Goose of Baldoon is I took this story and put it into contemporary times. So it's not set in the 1800s. It's set now. And it's about a woman named Simona who is fleeing an abusive relationship. And she's taken her 2 children, and she's trying to get as far away from her ex as possible. And what she thinks is that if I can go to this remote farmhouse, I'll basically be able to get away and hide. But what she doesn't know is that this goose is there, because the black goose is still haunting the property. So I've made a few changes in the script so that now there's not just one witch who's involved. It's actually two weird sisters. And so the goose manifests itself twice in the story, and it gets bigger and bigger and weirder and stranger every time it manifests itself because it's a supernatural creature. And the other thing is it's a double threat because it is a thriller, and André, the ex, does track them down. So while the kids are saying, "Mom, there's a weird goose. It's not good. We got to get out of here." She's saying, "No, no, no. All these weird things that are happening in the house because it's happening exactly like the old legend has it. The fires are starting. The pebbles are being flung. Things are falling from the rafters. I mean, it's all happening." The kids are saying, "Mom, there's something weird with this goose." And she's, "No, no, no, it's André." And guess what? André appears. Excuse me. And the goose appears. And there's a big standoff, Yeah, so there's a big standoff. And anyway, I'm not going to give away the ending. Let's say that there is, it's the craziest. Black goose turns into a prehistoric dinosaur avian creature movie you would ever see.
Oh,
and
awesome.
It's hilarious. It's a lot of fun.
Well,
it's also, with my writing, I put a lot of humor in my scripts. So there's a lot of wisecracks.
Oh, even with the horror stuff. I mean,
yeah,
it's important to inject the humor in that as well. I agree. I think it's so even movies that don't seemingly have funny bits in them that are like straight up horror movies. I feel like there is humor if you're paying attention. You just need to look.
Well, you needed to break up the tension.
Agreed.
I mean, you sort of, it's like ebbs and flows. You need to ramp up the action and then it sort of dies down a bit. Everything seems calm. It's like, okay, the threat is past, except then it's boom, back again, right? So, and a lot of the humor does come from the teenage daughter, Dana, because she's a teenager and she's like rolling her eyes and, "Why are we at this remote farmhouse? And Mom, you're nuts." And, this sort of thing. But there's a lot of bonding that goes on between the mother and the daughter too. That's a really important part of the script.
Is that something that sort of reflective of yourself as well? Like, do you have a good relationship with your mom?
I may have projected a bit of that, but not. My mother was always very supportive of my work. Like, she always encouraged me to do my writing, to go to university, and all of that. So I do appreciate that. We didn't have the best relationship, but yeah, it was good.
Oh, that's good. Oh, are you get to spend much time on these sets when they're being filmed, or are they mostly filmed overseas?
Oh, with the sets.
Yeah.
No, I mean, for the Galaxy Warriors, I was on set twice. Because I was actually
spots in different movies.
Yeah, I was doing some cameo things and background stuff. I have done other background for other movies as well. I don't know. I mean, I haven't been really on a big enough budget picture. I think that you hear about these movies where they will bring in the writer to be working on set, rewrite pages. I mean, I have rewritten pages, but it's not been in that type of scenario. It's not that glamour world.
Yeah, you're not sitting in the back just waiting for them and doing all the multicolored printouts for the different scripts.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny. I do some acting as well, and I was in a few different movies, and one I was in of Stephen King when they filmed here. I'm in Nova Scotia. And,
oh yes.
Yep, and there's when they filmed here when, and I remember when I got my script, going through it and looking at all the rewrite pages because they keep different colors for each page, right? That's
right.
And how many times it's color coded. So it was interesting kind of seeing that and seeing the amount of rewrites to the different areas where things were rewritten. It was very interesting.
Yes. Well, with the Galaxy Warriors, we had to rewrite some material because of the pandemic limitations for filming. So at one point there were only so many actors allowed on set at any given time. Right. So where we were planning a bigger, scene, it had to be honed down. And in fact, the the big scene that was supposed to be the first scene that was shot of the movie, which was originally a market scene, got completely shoved to the very end when finally things loosened up. And Brett had, he was doing a lot of filming in his garage, which he turned into so many different kinds of spaceships. It's really amazing. It really is. When you look at the footage, what he accomplished was really remarkable. But I could tell you, I spent quite a bit of time painting egg cartons matte black, so they could put them on the wall of the garage to make it look like one of the spaceships, because there were several. So they had the transport ship for the women prisoners, and then they had the police craft for the lawmen, and then they had the ships for the prison warden. Yeah, it was
like a great Roger Corman style movie.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. That's exactly the thing. Yeah,
the vibe you're going for. So, what's next beyond the Goose project?
Yeah, so Black Goose of Baldoon. I'm going to have to do some rewriting on it, I think.
Great title.
It has won a couple of awards, but it hasn't got picked up for production yet. I think I need to do some work on it. There's a couple of other projects that I've had like bubbling in the background. I'd like to work on a TV series. But I'm not going to go into details because it's still percolating. One of the areas I really want to go into is animation. I have a animation program called Cartoon Animator 4, and I have made a few shorts. And it's so much fun. I just love it. So that's an area that I want to pursue.
It's
doing cartoons.
Yeah, it's one that I really hope we'd see more of. I know Netflix just cut all their cartoon stuff because they had a drop in their viewership.
Yeah,
they went. I guess they decided the animation was their problem, not jacking up their rates like everybody else assumes this was the issue. But I was really disappointed because like they were doing a Bone series they just cut, which I was a huge fan of Jeff Smith's Bone, and I would love to see an animated project of that come to light. And they've been trying for years, and this seemed like the closest they got, and then this happened. So,
yeah. I was reading about that, which is, it's a mystery to me sometimes how things get made or don't get made or whatever. I with my ideas for cartoons, I mean, I need to work on them. I need to write some really good scripts, some pilots, and I have lots and lots of ideas. So that's not the issue. It's just finding the time to do the work and to do really good work.
Yeah, there is you definitely need the time there to bring the quality, that's for sure, because you can dip if you try to do too much at once.
Right.
Well, that's really cool. Well, it's really neat to hear about some of the inner workings of some of this stuff, because I'm always excited to talk to people that are in realms that I'm not. Like, I've done some film stuff and never on the writing side of it.
Yeah.
Or even the production side of it, which you have producer credits there as well, I see. Which is super cool. So, and I have a real love for that sort of a guerrilla. Like, I always make this joke that there's a special place in my heart for people that, and this doesn't apply to your situation, but for people that, really have a passion to do something and either don't have either the talent or the means to really make it the way they want to do it. The Ed Woods or the Tommy Wiseaus or those sort of people. So the people out there that are just like making a go of it and making it happen regardless, like, you have a lot of real respect for people that are able to manifest that in a world that keeps telling you can't do it. So that's amazing that you're out there. You're one of the champions out there getting this stuff made.
Well, thank you. And I'm hoping that, as I said at the beginning, representation matters.
Oh, I agree.
So that 100%. when they see that a woman like myself is writing comics or doing movies as I was saying, representation matters, because when other girls and women see other girls and women doing things, it sort of opens your eyes to those possibilities. And when I was growing up, I remember I was a pretty smart girl. I wasn't particularly pretty. And I was being told, look, you could be a nurse, or you could be a teacher, or you could be a secretary. And I remember saying, no, I'm going to be a writer.
I'm super happy to hear stories like this. And I've had this discussion actually with someone today about that, not just representation of all forms and how generationally things, someone was talking about kind of unrelated, but sort of related, just representation in general. Was when I was a kid, I used to watch the show. Remember Dark Angel? It was Jessica Alba's show. It was
oh yes, okay, yeah.
When I was a kid, and there's a character in that. I think she worked for like the memories are super vague, and this is the one that comes through. But I was really young. I was watching the show, and she had sort of like a hard ass boss who was a sort of a kind of a curmudgeon-y type character. And at one point in the series, he gets a girlfriend, and then it's revealed later that the girlfriend used to be a man, and that had transitioned into being a
okay.
And I remember there was a scene where they dropped the bombshell on him, and he's like almost uncharacteristically, you'd assume, but at no point in the series they ever set anything like that up. He's cool with it. He just accepts it, and they have a good relationship, and I think the relationship continues on throughout the show. And I remember as a kid, like recognizing how different that was, and how new it was for me, and just for seeing it on television in general, and how, like, as a kid, I think in my place it normalized it in a way to say, cool, like that's just something that people go through, and this is the person they are, and nothing should be different. You should accept them, and it should just be that. And I remember talking to someone today about that, how saying, like, even just as a kid, that imprinted on me. It maybe affected how accepting I am of people as an adult. So whether it's that intense or not, just the idea that something that seems like a mild part of fiction, and this is a much more esoteric reference than just women's obviously being able to write and do whatever they want in film and television, but just to say, like, these things that people don't realize what an impact they really have on the future generations, or even just like little girls like yourself that get to see women creating these things that they love so dearly, and getting to go do it themselves.
Absolutely.
Just makes you very happy. Well, thank you very much for being on the show, Janet. Is there anything else that I missed? Anything coming up that you want to discuss? Or
no, I'd like to say that thank you very much for having me on to talk about these things. And if you or your listeners are going to be in Ottawa or Toronto, Ron and I will be. Oh, hi, Kitty. Ron and I will be appearing at PopX convention and Fan Expo Canada. So it's a chance to have more chats, which we always love to do.
Oh, it makes me happy too to have folks that are just because, like, just as a fan myself going to Comic Cons, because I go to them sometimes to sell art, but before I was doing that, when I would just go and meet with creators like yourself, it always meant so much to me to be able to sit and have a real conversation with them instead of just here, buy my thing and move on. So that's awesome.
Oh no, we really enjoy engaging with like-minded people.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have a great community for that up there. So
okay, take care.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
And there it is, my conversation with Janet Hetherington. Fun talk, man. She's into so many things that I love. Doing horror comics, doing horror films, doing writing, journalism. A lot of beautiful work, lovely stuff, and just a great human being. I really enjoyed the conversation. And be sure to check her out at those events she mentioned. And, check out her partner Ron Sutton's work, who's a former guest on the show. If you like this interview, you should go back and check out my one with him, because that was a lot of fun as well. In the meantime, I will see you in a fortnight. I have a few irons in the fire, as I always say, about who my next guest will be. And I'll let you know on social media when I have that ironed out. In the meantime, if you don't have enough André in your life, and you can always use a little more, you can check out the other podcasts I do with Davin Skellhorn, in which we watch the original X-Men, the animated series from the 1990s, and review the episodes one at a time. Sometimes we have special episodes where we talk to people that worked on the show. But right now, I believe we're on the next episode, which will be dropping on Tuesday of this week, as we fire through season 2, and it's been a lot of fun. Davin's a great guy. I've had him on the show before, former guest, old school hippie type. Love the guy. Love what the show we do together, and I'm very thankful for him for getting me involved. It's a lot of fun. So anyway, go check that out. It's called X-Rated, the X-Men Animated Review Show. It's wherever you find your podcasts, and every live episode goes up. We do them live, and then the audio come out the day or so after. The live ones are on social media, and you can view those as we record them live every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock Atlantic time. And, or just wait for the audio one. But you don't get all the fun facial expressions and some of the things we hold up while we're reviewing different things throughout the episode if you don't watch us. Otherwise, if audio is good too, believe me, I'm an audio podcast guy. I don't get to watch a lot of them because I'm a busy dude doing all these podcasts for your viewing pleasure. Trying to get that sweet, sweet MeUndies money. Someday. Anyway, big thanks for tuning in. I can't thank you enough for being a part of the show. And for everyone out there's continued support. I mean, I think I got a notification 2 years ago on my Facebook memories that I started the show. And we're still going. So, 2 years, a long time to do a podcast. Especially one, like mine. I love the format. I think things are going really well, and I'm very thankful for all the support I have. So, once again, thank you very much. And be sure to tune in 2 weeks' time for another action-packed episode. In the meantime, stay safe and have fun.